welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Customer Success Unlocked. I know folks are just starting to roll in, so we will give everyone a moment here. We always love to know where people are dialing in from. Feel free to put a note in the chat where you are on this lovely Friday. And thank you for joining us on a Friday for this Friday webinar experiment we're having.
TGIF, I like it.
TGIF indeed. Welcome in. I see some familiar names. Welcome back to many of you. Thanks for joining us again for Customer Success Unlocked. We'll get rolling here, even as folks continue to join us. Welcome again. My name is Marley Wagner. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Digital Customer Success here at ESG. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar titled, How Healthy is Your Health Score? I will be serving as your host today alongside my co-moderator, ESG's VP of Customer Success, Peter Armley. Thanks for joining me again, Peter.
You're welcome, Marley. My pleasure.
And a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we jump into the conversation. Today's session, as usual, will be a fireside chat style interview. So you won't necessarily be seeing slides on screen, but promise there's nothing wrong with your Zoom. Second, I'd like to remind everyone that we are recording this session. A link to the recording will be made available to you within one business day. So that will be on Monday, since today is Friday. And throughout the session, we encourage and invite you all to submit your questions. There's a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Please go ahead and submit them there. We'll get to as many questions as we can, both throughout the conversation, as well as during the Q&A portion at the end. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests. I'm so thrilled to have both of you joining us today. So first, welcome David Sakamoto, VP of Customer Success at GitLab. Great to have you, David.
Awesome. Thank you, Marley. I'm excited. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you and Peter in the audience here. It's great. Thank you.
And second, we have Neal McCoy, VP of Professional Services at BigCommerce. Neal, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Really looking forward to this conversation about health scores. You know, health scores are a topic that we at ESG get asked about all the time. And you both have particularly interesting stories and experiences, I think, in this area. So very excited for you each to share your perspective with the audience. So I want to start by baselining. Okay, why are we talking about health scores? Why does this matter? So let's see, Neal, you're already off mute, so I'm going to go to you first, and I'm going to ask, why is health scoring important to you from your perspective, to your business at BigCommerce? And what impact have you seen, in really dedicating resources to creating an effective health score?
Yeah, health scores are essential for not only identifying risk in your business. People typically look at health scores from the perspective of, oh my gosh, there's something wrong, but it also uncovers opportunity. And so we look at our health scores from the point of view of, is our book of business getting healthier? Is it getting sicker? And then using the dimensions that make up our health score, it's essential for us to look at that month over time to help us figure out, where the opportunities lie, where we need to improve, or where do we need to lean in to help our customers grow.
And David, same question for you. Why are health scores important? What have they meant to you and to GitLab?
To me, I view it as a strategic measure of your customer. And, I like to start in terms of our overall go-to-market strategy. GitLab, we have the one DevOps platform. And so our general motion is that we're looking to, and so kind of our market is we have a bunch of disparate point products that we're displacing with a platform. And so from a strategy perspective, our key thing is looking to drive adoption across multiple use cases to really unlock the platform value. And so if you look at that strategic motion, the health score, we're really intentional. The health score, you can take a generic, there's a lot of kind of generic definitions of health score, but what's really important is that you map that health score out that's relative to your strategy, relative to where you want customers to be, and setting up the right instrumentation, whether it's this could be quantified or qualified, in order to measure your customers as they progress through the journey in your engagement with us, GitLab, or your respective company. So to me, it's really, really important measure that we defined very early on. We're still building to it, but it's absolutely critical to kind of understand where you are from a customer health, and are you delivering the value, as well as understanding whether the company is going to get the expected growth from a bookings and revenue perspective.
That's excellent, both responses, I think, because in my mind, you guys both are singing the same song to me, which is strategy, challenges, opportunities, as I've often viewed health scores as far, far more than just a tactical process or method. Part of a toolkit for customer success. It should be seen as a very vital strategic component. And to that end, can you each share a story of how you went about creating and iterating on the health score at your respective companies? So Neal, let's go to you.
Yeah, sure. So when I first joined BigCommerce about 4.5 years ago, we actually had a system in place, and there was nothing wrong with the system, but it was just collecting data, and it was just running, and it was throwing flags and running algorithms, but it wasn't relative to measures of success for our customers. And so we're an online e-commerce hosted platform. And so our customers, when they sell on our platform, their success is key and critical to us. But one of the things that we had to really start to understand was, well, what defines a healthy customer? And then what defines, a customer at risk where maybe they're having problems and we need to intervene? And so we took a step back. We actually just turned off the software, and we sat down and we started looking retrospectively at our most successful customers and our customers who left us. And we said, what are the things that contribute to either their success or their decline? And then we started asking ourselves, how can we objectively measure that? And so we created a 100-point based system, each 10 dimensions to that. So each dimension gets 10 points. And then we went about implementing that and tried to make it as objective as possible. And through that, we also I gotta give a big shout out to our friends at the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. They partnered with us, and every month we send them a snapshot of our 10 dimensions across our health scores. And they've looked at it, and we've learned some interesting things, right? If the customer hits a certain score, then we know they're going to continue to grow with us. If they hit another certain score on the bottom end, right, their likelihood of churning or leaving us goes up exponentially. We also learned a lot of things about engagement. We found that when customers engage with our customer success managers, they actually grow their revenue on our platform at a much higher rate than those who don't. So it's been a fantastic exercise. We've kind of gone in reverse. A lot of people put in software and then figure it out. We kind of figured it out, and now we're putting it in the software now.
That's smart. Yeah, very fascinating, Neal. Thanks for that. It sounds really super comprehensive, and I think that's the right approach. So, David, why don't you share your journey?
First, I'm going to jump in the Roll Tide. I see Brian gave a Roll Tide too. And so this recorded, my mother-in-law is going to love this because she is a huge Alabama fan. So I had to throw that in there and get some kudos to Colleen. But I'll just kind of dovetail into what Neal said. I think it's you defined intention what good looks like. But I imagine, at least for me, and I imagine the people that are on the webinar, everybody has to build, right? So you're starting from somewhere, and if you're looking at your leader, I generally think what you have currently is probably subpart of what you want to be, and that was certainly our experience. I've been at GitLab for just over 3 years, and so we first showed up. There was we had to build, the team. We had to build kind of the engagement approach. There's a lot of foundational stuff you have to build even before you get to even a qualified. We have TAMs. I'll say CSM just for broader context, but there's a lot of process you have to build even just to get to a point where you can reliably say, even if it's just the CSM saying, I think that's, green, yellow, red. So there's a lot of foundational work to get to a reliable, everybody's saying red means the same thing, the same set of measures. So ultimately what we've done is started just with a qualified view, right? If you have a CSM assigned, they give an assessment. Then over time we included, and we built out the old journey. And so they're kind of defining, and they were a lot qualified, like we had first value milestones and just general adoption, but it's all just judgment of the CSM. Then over time, then you start to weave in the data that you have, or you for many of us, have to work with product teams to get instrumentation and to get what you need to start to instrument the aspects of the process. So license, use case, really start to bring that data together. Then you start to initiate NPS. So there's really kind of this evolution of starting with a qualified view, being intentional around and prioritizing what's the most important thing against, as Neal said, the definition of good, and start to build both the process, the systems, the tools, enablement to kind of start to structure that out and build it out. And so we're on that journey. So we've kind of integrated at least the base components for most things. And now we're moving kind of towards, now that it's interesting, now that I've kind of had the challenge of no data, now we have a lot of data. So now we're investing in, analytics people, and we've initially built a data science team. So it's this constant evolution of going from qualified to quantified, and then ultimately moving from, data to metrics to actionable things. And as we move forward, we're going to look to drive automation that serves things up the CSM to drive automated responses, really enhance our digital journey. So again, we talk about that, centering back on health, is that health ultimately is that core of that North Star, what good looks like. And then you start to build all these other aspects around it.
Fantastic. Marley, before I pass it back to you, can I just ask one quick follow-up question that might actually run the risk of kicking off an entirely new webinar topic?
Let's do it, Peter. Let's go.
But David, you touched on it a little bit. You mentioned getting everyone kind of aligned, and I'm interested in if you can each provide a very kind of succinct answer around the effort of a leader, a CS leader, making that happen, that alignment happen, because health scores are not just going to be restricted to customer success, right? They have to involve other organizations. So there's really curious how each of you went about getting that alignment. Back to you again, Neal. Let's go with you.
Yeah, so I always say that every single person plays a role in customer success. It does not matter what your role is in the company, because everything that you do, whether you're in legal, you're in accounting, you work in the billing department, tech support, engineering, you all take actions that influence the customer in some way. And so I see my role as a leader in our organization as I'm an ambassador to help bring those stories of our customers back to other leaders in our organizations, so that they know and they understand, what is important to our customers. We have to be those advocates. As a leader, I have to be that advocate. Whereas my customer success managers, they have to be the advocates for their customers and help their customers be successful. At the same time, as a leader, you could put in any type of customer success management software, but if that's not built into your change management across your organization, then it won't be successful. And so that's key and important for customer success leaders.
Fantastic. David?
So Peter, I did notice you said succinct, and I feel like you're messaging that to me directly. Yeah, so very similar to Neal. I think customer success is a team sport, right? And I think the role of a modern customer success leader is to lead that team, but it's really to orchestrate across all the organizations and partner to really kind of build that and deliver to that customer journey and improve on that. And so in order to kind of anchor back to the health score, there's an aspect of the get, in terms of, I need to get some metrics from product. I need to get certain parts of the sales team to do certain things that kind of lead into the approach. And then there needs to be to give the data and information back in order for them to action it and understand it. And that's one of the key things that's really important as we evolve and continue to improve and make our more health score sophisticated. It also has to be simple, right? You can't have this like, here's the 10 vectors, like imagine a rep, you're going to go, okay, you have to go through the 3-day engagement program so you can understand what health score is and how to action it. Like, this will never work. So, we try to drive sophistication, but simplicity, and make it actionable. So that, you need to think of, both partnering with the different stakeholders, whether there's, sales or marketing, product, channel. You also have to ensure that that data is actionable and understood by those parties as well.
Awesome. And that was succinctly done there, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Well, and that actually leads me perfectly into what I want to talk about now, because I want to talk about data and what data actually goes into both of your health scores, right? Every company's health score is going to look a little bit different because it is about what is predictive of your unique customer's behavior, right? To Neal's earlier point about looking back at our best customers and our worst customers and what happened and what does that data tell us? But I'm curious to hear, 2 examples from you guys of what types of data actually go into each of your health scores. So I'm going to switch it up, and David, I'm going to go to you first.
Oh, I needed the time to think of my answer. Yeah. So the elements that we have. So when Neal starts to talk, I'll actually link our handbook page. Just FYI, GitLab's handbook is totally open. So all of our processes and basically everything that we do in customer success across the whole company is open. So if you're a success leader and you want to understand how we do it, search GitLab handbook customer success and everything's in there. Not that we're perfect, but it is a reference point.
Yeah,
but the key thing that we do is Jeff Bowman, our CS ops team, led the development we call Prove model. So it's product number 1, it's risk, it's outcomes. We deliver on verified outcomes, the voice of customer, and engagement. So the PROVE is product, risk, outcomes, voice of customer, and engagement. So again, this is a bit of a North Star. We haven't built all of these aspects yet, but if you think about it, we're leveraging telemetry or product usage data and license data. The risk is largely based on the CSM, if there is one assigned. Outcomes, we're still building to that. Voice of customer, we're leveraging both transactional, but also account level CSAT and NPS. And then engagement. And this is one of the things, like, do we have executive engagement? Are we seeing the right engagement throughout the journey? And that's, again, another area that we're going to build to over time. We'll start to incorporate other aspects. So they attending webinars and other aspects of broader engagement across the organization. But right now we have a basic measure in place.
Awesome. Great example. Neal, I'll go to you.
Yeah, we have a mix of, and I think it's important, right? There's some really common things, right? Engagement is always, are your CSMs engaged with your customer? Are they paying their bills? What's their contract status? NPS is very important to us. We use a blended NPS score, but then there are things I think you have to take a step back and look at to make sure that they're specific to what your solution offers your customers. For us, right, it's we're an e-commerce hosted platform, so are our customers growing on our platform? That's a key measure for us to look at to make sure that they're successful on our platform. We look at those things. Some of the other things that we also pay a lot of attention to really is engagement. Gainsight talks a lot about engagement, but so do some of the other guys. Churn Zero also talks about it a lot. And it's not just engagement, but the quality of engagement and what kinds of conversations that you're having with your customers. We spend a lot of time focused on what are the customer's goals, defining those goals, and making sure that that they're achieving those goals. That's reflected by referenceability. I feel it very strongly that part of our organization's obligation is to create referenceable customers. They'll go to trade shows and speak on your behalf. They're willing to do case studies for you, because that makes the selling motion easier for your sales team, and it creates a flywheel effect. And so we lean in on referenceability as well.
That's great. So those data components, both of you described, that's putting it all in place. And how do you go about analyzing the effectiveness of those health score models on an ongoing basis to make sure that it's delivering the kind of outcomes you hope for? Let's go back to David.
Yeah, so what we've been doing, primarily, we're using analytics now to look at, so right now we're actually kind of starting at a pretty high level. When we have certain engagement, do we see impact on net retention? So we're kind of initially going through that aspect now. As we continue to work through that, we do oftentimes we're looking at the result. So the result is transaction. Did we properly if we expected this to be healthy, did it actually yield health and expansion? Retention's the bare minimum for us, and a very low bar. For us, it's did we drive the expansion that we expected? And so we're still kind of working through that validation model, but right now it's kind of qualitative looking back. Did we get surprised on anything? We are, I mentioned earlier, we are investing in a data science team. So that, that is a key part of like looking at all the different components and did we predict that properly or not? So for us, it's around both the process of validating when you see the result that the health score predict that or not, and then also putting, good old fashioned analytics as well as data science to task to really validate whether it's giving us the right result. And then ultimately what we're going to, once you get proven that out, then you can start driving automation, starting with our digital journey, but also then we're going to start driving automation throughout, even when we have CSMs assigned.
I was going to say, you went a long time without saying the word prove. So you did at the end. So great. Because I think that's key, right? You have to, the analysis is vital. Of course, it's critical, but you have to actually make sure that it's proving what your hypothesis is. So Neal, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, we were super fortunate. I mean, we have a full-time business analyst that helps us with the structure of our data, and she's just been fantastic. Brian gave us a roll tide. We've actually work with Brian at the University of Alabama, and so for the past 18 months, we actually send a snapshot of our data every month over, and they've looked at everything from escalations to opportunities, for cross-sell opportunities to all the other dimensions that we have within our health score system. And it's been able to show us a lot over time, the things that are working, the things that need to make adjustments. And so having that snapshot month over month, we sit down with that team, we go through the data, they're always finding new things for us to help us lean in on. And it's really helped prove the efficacy of the model. So right now we're implementing Gainsight, and the guys at Gainsight are just like, so we're really just automating what you guys have been doing. And yes, but it's that data that's been key to validating our approach. We want to make sure that it's empirical, it makes sense, and that it matters to our customers, right? That the actions we're taking actually help improve our customers' health scores over time, which under our model, we're seeing that it is. And that's been probably one of the most rewarding parts of the exercise of the journey for us.
Love it. And I think that's so important, to Peter's point. Are we proving that what we theorized, right? We're making hypothesis at the beginning. We're coming up with this whole process and these formulas and this calculation. Okay, are we proving our hypothesis correct? Or do we need to go back and tweak that hypothesis a little bit, right? And I think some companies get a little bit scared to go through that because they're like, oh man, I don't want, I just built this, I don't want to change it. And I would just encourage everyone to embrace that level of change, right? Even if that means you're making a few tweaks over time and it takes you a while to get to that really, really accurate predictive health score, guess what? All that's doing is serving you and your customers better and better and better over time, even when it can be frustrating along the way, right?
100%.
I was going to say we talked about the team sport being functions like marketing and product. And so, also bring it in within CS, you think of health score, you think of the CS field team, but also CS ops. The really key thing I think people often overlook is enablement. So we've got a dedicated enablement team because it's really important that as you're driving these, it's a constant aspect of change management. And to some extent, that change management is a limiter versus the ability to kind of build out new stuff. Because you can build out a bunch of stuff, but if people don't understand it and can't action it, it's not integrated into the lifecycle journey, it's not going to yield the results. So, the team sport, make sure you include your enablement teams, and enablement is a strategy for driving the change management as you evolve.
Absolutely. Really important. Okay, so I'm especially excited to ask you guys this question because we hear this a lot from companies who are just starting out on their customer success journey, that they say, oh yeah, I have a health score. It's my CSM's sentiment, right? XYZ CSM says, yeah, this customer loves us. Their health score is green. Or XYZ CSM says, oh, this customer is not super happy today. their health score is red or somewhere in the middle, right? Not a bad place to start, right? That's a valid place when you're just starting out. But there are some big challenges with that for more than a little while. So I want to talk about first what those challenges are, and then if and how you still can incorporate that CSM sentiment into a health score without making it the whole thing. So Neal, I'll go to you first on this one. Where do you see the challenges here?
Well, look, everybody wants to be optimistic about their own book of business. I remember when I was a CSM, I wanted to be optimistic about my book of business as well. I can also have great relationships with the day-to-day people that I work with. That doesn't mean that a new chief technology officer hasn't rolled in and said, I'm not this shop, I'm a different shop, and I don't care. You know, all your objective measures can be spot on, but you could still lose the business, right? And so you need to have a blend of objective and subjective in there. CSM is going to be able to pick up on the fact that, you know, hey, that's a new chief technology officer. They're more comfortable with the competitor's technology. And it doesn't matter how successful we are, like we've got to put together a plan to get out in front of that. But at the same time, you can have a great relationship with your day-to-day person, and all the other objective measures are going by the wayside and trending south. And that can be a blind spot for a customer success manager as well. So you need to have a balance of both, and you need to be able to look at them and measure them over time.
Yeah, great point. Really great point. David, what are your thoughts? What are some challenges to that, you know, relying so heavily on just CSM sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately I guess there's two ways. I view it as because we don't always have a CSM attached. You know, the health score, if you build in the right data and automation, it'll apply to your digital journey as well. So, you know, certainly if it's the pure digital journey, that's what you got. Now you can also do reach out from, you know, AEs or other aspects to get a qualified view. But ultimately, you know, there's always going to be a mix of quantified and qualified, right? And ultimately what we're just talking about is it's at the very beginning, it's like 100% qualified, and then it shifts towards something much less. But the way that we view it is the CSM always has right of refusal to override and go, no, I know because of these factors. Most of the time it's flipping it, you know, to green to a different color. So there's always that override that I think makes sense, you know, when you have a CSM engaged. So I think you're always doing that. But the other kind of nuance that I look at is that quantification is ultimately also intended to help that CSM, right? To ultimately give them a broader real-time view, if it's data driven, around really the health. So in many ways, we're just trying to enable the CSM when assigned to be able to drive the right engagement with the customer. And so again, there's always going to be that qualified aspect unless you're in a pure digital journey.
Yeah, and you know, I think you both mentioned earlier that some sort of, you know, sentiment or gut check is part of your health score, right? And I think that makes sense in most scenarios. Again, David, unless we're talking about a purely digital journey, that does typically make sense. But, you know, what we see is it's somewhere between 10 and 20% of your health score typically, right? There are exceptions, certainly, but that's the most common versus, right, 100%. I also think that that override note you made, David, is an interesting thing that, you know, we didn't prep for that, but I want to talk about that for a second, because I think, you know, we tend to think like what Neal said, oh, CSMs want to be optimistic, right? They want to say, oh no, my customer's doing great, right? Everything's sunshine and rainbows and it's fantastic. Well, what about if there's really like an emergency going on, right? Your whole team of champions just up and quit at your customer. Who's going to know that other than your CSM? So David, talk a little more about that override.
Yeah, I mean, we had that as one of our measures. And again, that's a qualified measure. So we have engagement. So loss of sponsors, a clear one, M&A activity, or something happens in the market and you see that company's, you know, been impacted. So there's a lot of, ultimately, I guess we technically call it a measure, but it's really qualified. So engagement. Now over time, we're going to build more data that's associated with engagement, like are they attending events and other things like that. But ultimately, I think we have kind of the structure there. But I just would never, the way I look at it is we're going to provide data and metrics and automation to help drive that engagement. But ultimately, you know, customers are humans, right? And our CSMs are humans, and they're going to drive, if we're doing our jobs right, we're going to drive an engagement across a breadth of different stakeholders. And through that, they're going to have an intuitive, there may be an intuitive read of something that we want to respect. And they can, they should certainly have the ability to come and say, independent with the measure seeing, this is what I see, whether it could be, red to green or vice versa. So, I think that's the reason why you have CSMs. They're talented, they're sharp, and you enable them with data and metrics. And then ultimately, they're the ones that are kind of driving that account with the broader team.
Yeah. Neal, do you have thoughts on that? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really key. And a lot of that automation, one of the important things about automation is it makes the CSM's job easier. So for example, right now, a lot of our health scoring is very manual effort on our CSMs, and that's why we're automating right now. Because if you're carrying a book of 30 or 40 accounts or more, to go through and look at 10 dimensions every single month, you're probably going to miss something. So to have objective automated data that sets a call to action, and a CSM can walk in and say, "Oh, I didn't know this was happening," right? That makes their jobs that much easier. So it's that blend, but automation is absolutely key.
So the automation is of course a worthy objective for customer success organizations. Is there a risk? I'm going to go off script here, guys, a little bit from your prep call. So
keep it succinct though, Peter.
Be sick. Oh, I should be succinct. I'll try to be succinct. What kind of guidance would you give to? Well, you guys are both senior leaders. What about your managers of teams? What kind of guidance would you give to your managers about how they could employ the health scores to coach their CSMs? Why don't we start with you this time, Neal?
So two things. You hit on automation. I would not invest a lot in automation up front.
Okay.
Sorry, Apple products, phone's ringing. Anyway, don't invest a lot on the front end of automation, because what you'll end up doing is you may engineer something that may not be useful. Try something out over time, and then once it's proven, then seek automation. But then in terms of managers, they should be using, the guidance I give to managers is use those health scores when you're sitting down with your customer success manager and you're looking at your book of business. See what trends, right? Help point out the opportunities. Use those dimensions to point out the opportunities and the risks, and to develop your coaching and your playbooks for your CSMs to follow. Use those dimensions as a coaching tool.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with the automation. Is if it becomes so sophisticated, I think there might be a tendency to let it go on its own and not use it as an instrument for coaching and stuff. So David, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, if I think contextually what's important about it, like ultimately you want to remove, as Neal was saying, other non-value or low value activities that a CSM is doing from the eyes of a customer, right? And so ultimately, if you're able to up level them, then your managers are there coaching how to kind of up level their conversation, drive higher value engagement and conversation. So that coaching is really together with the manager and the CSM around how do we drive the right conversation? How do we drive the right higher value engagement with those customers? So, if you're doing a good job, you're starting to remove those layers of things that take away time from doing that. Mm-hmm. Right. I think I would speculate a lot of people out there going, how do we get our teams to be more strategic? Right. I look at a lot of this data and automation is to kind of remove that other overhead to allow more focus on the things that are really important to a customer versus, kind of keying in data or just other overhead that may be needed because you don't have those things in place yet, but you want to ultimately kind of start removing those.
Yeah, I see health scores as a mechanism for elevating the role of managers. It should be seen as a tool, as an assist for them to move into that more kind of business focused kind of guidance conversations. That's
Yeah, and Peter, if I could expand just a little bit on that too, what works today doesn't always mean that it works tomorrow. And managers have to be vigilant. The market changes, your competition changes, your business changes, the needs of your customers change, and you have to pay attention to those things. Because, and that should surface itself within the health scores. And you may see that a certain dimension of your health score, it's no longer relevant, or there's new factors that need to be brought in for consideration as well.
And Peter, in the spirit of going off script, you know, you could always use these to coach your customers.
Oh, wonderful idea.
Right. And so that's really around, like, you know, you know, we've seen, I was in a EBR with a customer this week, and they were super, like, we talked through the health score, like, here's your health score across our CI use case. And they were really interested in, like, okay, how do we understand that? What do we need to be leveraging to get more value? And on top of that, you know, how do we compare against our peers in our industry? So, like, you know, this can turn into also a really valuable, bring a lot of value to your customers and help understand, make sure that they're maximizing the value, they're getting the ROI that they want. And oftentimes they're looking for that same data to drive initiatives on their behalf or to prove ROI. So I think I look at it also as a high value to our customers.
I love that. I've actually tried to promote that before. I hit a lot of resistance though, David, to share or expose health score to customers. The argument was that, well, you're showing dirty laundry or our opinions of that. And I said, well, ideally you want transparent relationships with your customers. And so a health score should be, if you believe in it, should be an objective opinion. And why not? It could be a good conversation started with your customers. So
yeah, and we focus. I think the key area that is value there is like the usage, the use case utilization, the product component of that health score. Because if you do that right, that should be designed to give maximum value to our customer.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, Peter, one of the ways we try to frame is we don't necessarily say, well, here's your health score. But what we try to frame customer coaching as, you know, within your industry, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, our most successful customers, this is what it looks like, right? And we try to coach them in that direction within their industry and show them positive examples of what they should emulate so they can mirror their success or mirror the success of our most successful customers.
Awesome. Great.
We have a great question from the audience, from Art, that I want to ask you both. So, you know, we already talked about analyzing your health scores to measure their effectiveness, right? Are they working? Are they telling us what the accurate information that we need to know? This question is about evaluating your health scores to see if they're improving over time, right? So I want to ask you both kind of how often you're evaluating if health scores are improving, what's that cadence that your teams both look at? And then how are you going about doing that? And what do you do with the information, right? If you see, oh, you know, this health score declined, what happens? Let's see, David, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, so what I would state is we're building as quickly as possible, right? But I would say, like I mentioned earlier, our limiter is to really make sure that we're doing it in a sane way. So our CSMs are not just constantly, like, the ground is constantly moving underneath me and I never know when I'm looking at something, I never know what it means. So we're moving as quickly as possible, gated by our ability to make sure they're driving the appropriate change management with the teams so that they can understand and action it. So, you know, at GitLab, one of our values is iteration. So we're very kind of iterative. So I would even say it's maybe even weekly or, you know, monthly to weekly timing in terms of building it out. But that's because we're really ambitiously looking to integrate a lot of the product usage data, you know, get better customer survey or customer sentiment data. So we're very much in the build mode and moving as quickly as possible. So it's kind of ongoing. To be honest, I'm not sure I see a steady state, because over time we're going to build out a robust, you know, probably the biggest thing is building out the robust product health score. But I see that as something that will constantly iterate. And kind of going back to the earlier question of, like, truly validating, are these truly the things that make sense in terms of actually we're going to do analysis around truly the things that are sticky that drive the net retention. So we'll eventually get to the point we're going to measure that, and then be constantly tuning that, both in terms of the robustness. Are they the right things? Is it the right sequence of things? Because ultimately there's an adoption evolution for the customer. Here's your MVP. You'd start with these of the 10 things of this use case. Let's get these 3 done, then the next 3, the next, so there's constantly going to be that kind of, are they the right things? Are they driving results? Are they in the right sequence? So ultimately it's looking to drive, it's kind of a measure to drive the right engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. Neal, how about you? How often are you guys looking at, hey, as my customers, XYZ customer, is their health score improving? Are they getting better? Are they getting healthier? Is our chance of expanding with them growing over time? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, we look at it. We look at our health scores in aggregate month over month. So we sit down every month and we take a look at them and we see if we're getting healthier. Since we've implemented this system almost 2 years ago, we are getting healthier. Our book of business is getting healthier over time. But to David's point, you never stop iterating because the market changes, things change, and you have to constantly make adjustments. But we try to not create an iteration nightmare for customer success managers, right? They've got to focus on the relationship and the success of the customer. And so we try to keep it within the boundaries of our 10 dimensions. And it's more nuanced changes. We try to make nuanced changes. Now, there may be something that comes up that just requires us to do something radically different. And if that comes, then we'll address it at that time.
Yeah, and I think too, there's a fine line between, hey, am I measuring if, whatever, this customer subset or this individual customer or whatever is getting healthier, right? That's good. That's positive. You should be looking at that. But I think there's a fine line where people can tend to cross and they're like, oh, my goal is to make all my customers green. That's a valiant goal. That's never going to happen, right? There's a bell curve within a customer base.
Mhm.
And so I would also encourage folks, yes, you're trying to move reds to yellow and yellows to greens. Absolutely. That doesn't mean you're ever going to get to 100% of your customer base is green. And if you ever find yourself there, that might be a good time actually to look back and say, oh, maybe my customer health score needs some tweaking. Any thoughts on that from either of you?
100%. Everything is on a bell curve. And look, there's a million reasons why customers can leave. They may not have the right expectations about what your solution provides, or you may let them down. I mean, look, it's just the nature of the business. Sometimes you can let customers down, or they don't have the right expectations. It's all about how do you shift everything to the right side of the bell curve as much as possible. But the most important thing is learn from those who are leaving, right? Learn why they're not staying with you. But as equally important is on the other side of that bell curve, always focus on what makes your customers most successful and use that. We try to use that with everything in terms of just providing examples. We offer that up to our marketing department every month in terms of here's our most successful customers. Here's what makes them successful. Because again, it goes back to creating that flywheel effect. If you can market more effectively, you can sell more effectively, you can create more referenceable customers.
I'm sure they love that.
Yeah. When I think of if I saw a portfolio view of the book of business and I saw all green, you could take one of two. I look at it as one of two views. One is everybody's being overly optimistic. We've designed our health score wrong. That'd be one. Probably the one that came to my mind first is that we're not being ambitious enough in driving value to our customers.
Good point.
Right. So to me, it's a certain level of the health is defined of like, to me, it's like indication of value. And if we're like, oh, or, that tells me there's a lot more that we could do to be more ambitious to drive the right result for the customer. So that's a little bit my mindset. It's my Kaizen mindset. Always get better.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, customer success should be seen as an instrument for driving change and transformation with clients, right? And so if everything's green, I agree completely. That likely means you've not designed it properly. You're overly optimistic. It's not reflecting the reality. And there's probably a danger there, actually, that they might be maybe doing an upgrade, and would they be green in an upgrade? Maybe not, right? So I think you have to stay on top of that stuff.
Yeah.
And can I ask another off-script question? Marley, when you asked me to do this webinar with you, I thought we need more than an hour, but I'm going to try and keep this short. You guys are both very experienced leaders of customer success. Clearly, you've done a great job of building health score kind of practice. And what guidance would you give to other leaders around what skills they should have to make sure that health scores stay central to the mission of customer success, and to drive iterative improvement in your organizations? What skills should they be focusing on employing for themselves, and being part of that story? Let's start with you, Neal.
I would start with make sure that you're capturing data, right? And that you're evaluating it over time, because trends over time will tell the story. And make sure that your data is a mixture of objective and subjective measures, so that you're getting the sentiment. Look, your customer success managers, they know your customers. Their voice is critical and it's important. But also look at the objective data as well, because that's going to tell you a different side of the story that's key and critical. But don't try to over-engineer it. Start simple. If you want to start with just 2 or 3 dimensions, start with that, measure it over time, and then increment over time. When we first started, we only had 5 dimensions. We expanded it to 10 because we started finding things that were, okay, well, this is kind of important, or we're starting to see that this is carrying weight and influencing the health score, and we're not accounting for it. So start simple, but make sure that you're baselining it and measuring it month over month, week over week, whatever cadence you want, but that you're taking time to reflect and look at it and analyze that data.
Terrific. And I think I heard you kind of infuse like the human kind of element in that. You're always trying to be objective. You have to make room for the subjective too.
Absolutely.
David, what are your thoughts on the kind of leaders, giving guidance to leaders around what they should focus on in terms of their skills?
Yeah, I think there are 4 things. Being strategic, being collaborative, being operational, and being analytical. So strategic, as we talked about, this ultimately should tie to your go-to-market strategy, or what you're trying to drive across your journey. Collaborative, we talked about the team sport, right? Across the organization, but also, collaborative within the team, your CS ops, your enablement, but also really important to get that engagement with your field teams. Is this the right? Because they're the ones who are like, this is wrong, this is not helpful. So that collaboration will help you refine that, and gives ownership to that team. Operational, like all of these things require process and policy and systems and other things to actually support it. So when you look at something, you can actually know that it's reliable. People are choosing that for you understand the data is good, it's reliable. If it's qualitative, they're making it off a set of documented rules. And then the last one is analytical, right? So there's a lot of analytics that come involved. And so, you have to be building that in and reviewing, using the data to drive a lot of these decisions. We talked about proving things, ensuring it's valuable. That's the analytical piece. So again, strategic, collaborative, operational, and analytical.
So what's that acronym?
I don't know yet. I came up on the fly. So
nicely done.
Peter, if I could just expand one last thing too, is share it internally. Don't keep it just within your customer success organization.
Yeah.
Share it, evangelize it across the business, because again, everybody plays a role in customer success. Even if it's to the point of being annoying, tell people in marketing, tell people in sales, tell people in product engineering, finance, whatever. Just evangelize it so that they have perspective, because it's important for them to understand the voice of the customer, and it's best reflected by the customer success team sharing these things.
Yeah, ultimately, you're providing them with information and insights, and that's a gift to the other.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
David, I was actually going to say that you sounded so prepared for that answer. But like those must just be your go-to.
Goa.
Goa. Yeah, there we go.
I like it.
A little help from the audience.
So we have an anonymous question from the audience that I'm going to rephrase a little bit, but I am going to ask you guys. So, when we talk about health score, we talk about red, yellow, green. Everyone uses that language, right? But I think there can be a breakdown in what does red mean? What does yellow mean? What does green mean? So first of all, I'm curious if each of you have specific definitions that you use internally of like, hey, this is actually what this color means, right? Does red mean at risk for churn or, a downgrade, or does red mean something else in your business? So I'll start with that. Neal, can you start first?
Yeah. I hate to disappoint you. We don't use red, yellow, green.
Tell me what you use instead. That's even better.
Yeah. So we use 5 dimensions. We use excellent, very good, good, bad, churn, risk, or churning. And so we use those 5 dimensions. And it's part of that points-based system. And so to hit that excellent score, it's a very high bar to meet. And again, when you go and you look at our health scores, the way we have them laid out in our system today, it lives on a bell curve. And of course, you want everything to be good, over to excellent as much as possible. We do churn risk and then we do churning because I think you have to understand where to invest. When you're bad, you want to get back to good. If you're churn risk, then of course, you're going to give that more focus and attention. But if you know that there's nothing you can do, right? You shouldn't be diverting those resources to that, right? And so we carry that as well as a health score. So we use those 2 dimensions or 5.
Follow-up question. When you say excellent, does that automatically mean that person is a candidate for expansion or upsell?
No, not necessarily. You could have a business that I've used this term or heard this term used also. You kind of hit a saturation point, right? A certain business is only so big, and unless they go through some kind of like M&A or expansion of something of that nature, they kind of are what they are. That doesn't mean they can't be excellent. Excellent doesn't necessarily mean there's more money to be made, because there's things that they can do that can help you as well, right? It's a reciprocal relationship. Maybe they're willing to get on the stage at a conference somewhere and sing your praises, and that helps bring business to you. So excellent can mean many different things. It's not just, is there more money to be made with that customer?
Sure.
Neal, keep it simple. No, just kidding.
David, how about you guys? Do you have definitions you use for your?
Yeah, we do. We love colors. We have, I'm an exec. I like colors, like but I've, so we use the red, yellow, green in some components, but we purposely decided to keep them at the component level, not kind of aggregate it up, because I think we haven't, we talked about proving the numbers. We haven't proven like weighting across the different components of things we define for customer health. So I'm not going to make a guess and figure out what that is at the top level. So, we kind of keep it at the component level. It's really there to kind of just help visually draw, oh, this doesn't look right. Now, may not be an issue or not, but really it's just to draw, to me, I just look at it as something to draw attention to look in further. Yeah. And so, I don't overarch in terms of aggregating it all up into one kind of color, as much as just as you're looking through it, whether you're a CSM or their manager or an exec, you can kind of scan through and kind of helps you focus where you should be looking and asking questions. That's
really interesting. Yeah. And I think, like I said, Neal, you actually answered the question even better because you don't use red, yellow, green, because I think that's what we default to, right? But the point is, you don't have to use that, right? And even you, David, you use those at a component level, but may not roll it up that way, right? You don't have to, your ultimate health score does not have to be red, yellow, green. It can be, that's a super useful tool, right? Visually really easy to look at for a CSM or a manager or whoever. But there are other ways to do that. And I think regardless of what you ultimately decide, whether you're going to use red, yellow, green, whether you're going to use 1 through 5, I've seen some people who like 1 through 7, that seems a little complex to me. I feel like 5 is maybe the max, but whatever, right? Whatever you want to use. I think the important thing there is that you're defining what that means to your business, right? What are the levels? What do they mean? What behavior do they then trigger when a customer hits that, good or bad? So
Yeah, and what resonates most with the other stakeholders in your company that need to pay attention to this information? I mean, maybe red, yellow, green is the best option. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go
Should
ahead.
I ask the next one?
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I'm really interested in your answers to this question, really about the future and what's next for you both. And I just want to preface it by saying you've both talked clearly to being able to leverage health scores really well in your companies. And I like to think that that's really common in our customer success community, but I don't think that's true. So you guys are good examples. And so I'm really curious to hear each of you talk about how you're going to continue to improve the health score practice. I keep calling it a practice because I think it's more than just a tool. It's actually a lot of stuff wrapped up around it. So let's start with you, Neal.
So for us at BigCommerce, it's really about automation and automating as much of the objective materials as we can to reduce the administrative burden on our customer success managers. And part of it is also just to continue to learn and iterate. I think David said it best, right? There's no set it and forget it. You have to iterate. You have to continue to learn and make modifications. I mean, our business is growing and changing. Our competitors are doing things in the marketplace too that we have to respond to. And so you said it best, Peter, it is a practice and it's something that you have to have the discipline to stick with and be, objective. And, there may come a point in time where a dimension of our health score just doesn't make sense anymore. And we need to be willing to let go of it or look for something different, right?
Very well said. Yes, thank you. David?
So Peter, the question is the future of health score
at your place. Like,
I thought it was the future because I was gonna say it's NFTs in the metaverse. That's our health scores are going to the metaverse, Peter.
I can see that. I can see that.
I mean, I think of like ultimately, what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to add value to our customers and drive outcomes, right? So I think for us, if I kind of draw a vision out there, it's ultimately leveraging it where almost even the health score gets abstracted and it allows us to directly provide recommendations to our customers. Awesome. Specifically like, here's some things you should do to achieve your outcomes. Now that's a pretty far reaching approach, but somewhere along that journey, even if it helps us CSM or kind of in a more faster real-time automated way gives valuable guidance to CSMs and or customers, that's ultimately the goal.
I think you just described like a really benevolent Frankenstein customer success.
There we go. Yeah, it's a highly automated where it's where it's like based on what we see, we have recommended actions. So that talk about taking things on. It's like there's an action for a CSM, but ultimately, better if it was just a direct action that we could articulate.
I think you and I talked about this over breakfast about 5 years ago. So it's nice to see you're still thinking.
Yeah, likewise. We'll be in the metaverse, Peter.
It's a worthy goal, David. I like it. That's fantastic. And I think that is a great note to end our session on today. I want to thank my co-host Peter for joining me once again this month.
My pleasure.
Thank both David and Neal for joining and sharing their expertise and their knowledge and their humor. I appreciate it so much, especially on this Friday. Thank you all.
Yeah. Everybody have a good weekend.
Yeah, happy Friday. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
To the audience.
Yes, big thank you to everyone for joining us. A reminder that you'll receive a recording of this session on Monday. Give us the weekend to get that all wrapped up for you, and we will send it over to everyone who registered for the session. And I hope you'll all join us again next month for the next installment of Customer Success Unlocked. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.